A fiery collision at Los Angeles International Airport, at least 3 confirmed deaths, another 30 injured. I'm Patrick Emery.
And I'm Susan Rook. We will have the latest developments from the war in the Gulf later, but first, this breaking story from Los Angeles. This also just in, CNN's Dan Blackburn is on the scene at Los Angeles International Airport, where a news briefing is apparently being held by U.S. Air. We will get the latest information from Dan Blackburn within minutes, just as soon as it's available. This is a U.S. Air 737 crashed on landing tonight at LAX. It collided with a small commuter airliner. The two planes, U.S. Air Flight 1493 and SkyWest Flight 5569, collided on the runway. The FAA confirms that the U.S. Air flight was landing. The smaller plane was taking off. After the collision, the jetliner burst into flames and skidded into a building. The smaller plane apparently has been pinned underneath the Boeing 737. Firefighters flooded the wreckage in the runway with fire-retardant foam as thick black smoke poured out. There are at least 3 confirmed deaths, at least 30 injuries. At least 6 people are reported in critical condition. U.S. Air reports that 89 people were aboard U.S. Air Flight 1493 to Los Angeles. Flight 1493, by the way, originated in Syracuse, New York, with stops in Washington, D.C. and Columbus, Ohio. SkyWest Flight 5569 was reportedly headed from LAX to Palmdale, California. We have an unconfirmed report of 13 people on that smaller commuter plane. Now, soon after the crash, one of CNN's affiliates in Los Angeles was able to speak with an eyewitness. Let's listen to that.
One of the residents here, several residents, as a matter of fact, saw the plane when it was coming down. Beth Olson was walking, happened to be walking through her bedroom and looked out her window and saw the plane as it was about to land. Now, Beth, tell us what happened then.
When I looked out the window, the back of the plane was on fire, and it was right around here where, after a split second, the whole body of the plane engulfed in flames. The runway had flames on it as it came through, and all of a sudden the plane came to a stop. We didn't know what stopped it, but apparently the building had stopped it. But it started at this point right as it was landing, and it started in the rear of the plane.
Okay, so it's the flames broke out before it landed.
Right.
Now, there are reports that there's a small aircraft involved also. Did you see any other aircraft?
At that point, I didn't even think it was landed when I first saw the flames in the back of the plane. But then as it landed, you could see a trace of flames on the runway as it was going down the runway. Where they're showing some small aircraft is way over by the building. So I don't think that was at the point of where I first saw the flames.
So do you think the small plane was on the ground?
Already, yeah. I did not see it over at the end where I originally saw the flames start.
And on the phone with us right now is David Shipley. Mr. Shipley is a spokesperson for U.S. Air. Mr. Shipley, are you there?
Yes, I am.
What can you tell us to advance this story at this point?
Well, you have the basic information. To the best of our information and to some U.S. Air employees who witnessed our aircraft was on a completely routine approach and landing to Los Angeles. I don't have any information about a collision. I understand from eyewitnesses at the scene there was another aircraft involved. I can't identify the aircraft or the circumstances of the collision.
Well, apparently it was a SkyWest commuter aircraft. Do you have any indication as to why the SkyWest and your U.S. Air 737 were on the same runway?
Now, that's a question to be better directed to the air traffic controllers.
All right. Can you tell us anything more beyond the figures that we have concerning deaths and injuries?
No, I understand there are some fatalities. I don't know which aircraft they were. And there are obviously some injuries, but I cannot confirm numbers at this point.
And the route of the U.S. Air craft?
The aircraft originated in Syracuse, New York, went to Washington, D.C., then to Columbus, Ohio, and then the destination was Los Angeles. It was scheduled to go from Los Angeles on to San Francisco.
There had been apparently some confusion as to the changing of the exact route of this particular flight. Can you tell us anything about that?
I'm not aware of any deviations from his normal schedule.
That it apparently is a new, slightly altered flight pattern for this particular flight?
I have no idea.
You do not.
As far as I know, it was on his scheduled routing for this evening.
Is that, can you tell us anything about that runway, congestion at that particular runway at LAX?
No, I can't. That information would have to come from the local air traffic controllers.
All right. You had 94 passengers aboard, a crew of 7. Is that correct?
83 passengers and a crew of 6.
83 passengers and a crew of 6 aboard.
That's correct.
All right. David Shipley with U.S. Air, thank you very much for what you've been able to tell us. Sue?
And as we have been seeing throughout the night, there were several people who are eyewitnesses of this crash between the Boeing 737-300 series and the small commuter plane. Let's hear from one of the eyewitnesses.
From what I could see, there was an engine laying down on the runway, probably about 100 feet from the main part of the plane, and that's what kept exploding. Maybe every 3 or 4 minutes there was a pop from that and more smoke. That once they had the fire on the plane out, that engine was still, or whatever was sitting on the runway was still on fire, and the flame down on the runway was still on fire too.
Could you tell us more about the passengers coming down the chutes?
I saw 3 passengers, what I thought were passengers. They came from the plane, the door on the plane. One of the guy didn't even use the chute. He jumped from the plane onto the pavement, and the landing gear was still up on the back of the plane, so that's a pretty far drop. And I saw 2 other people slide down the ramp, and then at that point, there was so much smoke coming out of it, I could not see anything.
Was there a lot of fire?
From what I could see, the front of the plane was on fire at one point, and then the rear of the plane was on fire. And I don't know if it was all inside there at one time, but the whole plane must have been on fire.
Was it there by itself for quite some time before emergency vehicles arrived?
I would estimate about a minute and a half before. And the fire department is right next door to where the plane crashed. I believe it's the building next door. So I see him do the drills every couple of days.
Now, we heard some reports of a commuter airliner that was also hit. Did you see anything that would substantiate that?
I did not see a commuter plane. I could clearly see the U.S. Air logo on the plane and around the ground because the flames were so bright. I did not see any other plane. And if it had hit another plane, it must have hit it on the impact, which would be halfway down the runway.
Now, what about the cockpit itself? You said the cockpit appeared to be on fire.
It appeared to be on fire. That's all I can say. There was the glow inside the cockpit. The front door of the plane was shut.
Were there anybody on the ground near the plane? Any workers or people running around?
I couldn't really see it. There was so much confusion, in my apartment alone with it, people walking. I only saw the people about 3 people jumping out of the plane, and then the emergency workers coming up.
Again, to recap, at least 3 people are confirmed dead, at least 30 people are confirmed injured. That number could go up. The FAA is saying that a total of 101 people were on board both planes, the Boeing 737, the U.S. airplane, and the small commuter flight. The FAA is saying that 29 people are, quote, unaccounted for, 72 people accounted for. We will have the very latest information and an update on the Gulf War when we continue.
Take your average family trip, but take it in a not-so-average family car, the new Volkswagen Passat. The Passat wagon comes with 4-wheel disc brakes. It's got plenty of room for your family, and best of all, Fahrvergnügen, which means you might even forget you're driving a family car.
Are we there yet?
Well, maybe not. Fahrvergnügen, it's what makes a car a Volkswagen. Nice logo, too.
These people never thought of themselves as high-pressure salespeople. They've always been committed to service. That's why they've become successful Better Homes and Gardens real estate agents, and why they use our proven real estate marketing systems to serve their customers better than anybody. After all, we've found that once you place service above everything, everything else falls into place. For information about a career in real estate, call 1-800-ADVANCE or your local Better Homes and Gardens real estate firm.
Quaker Oat Squares. You're going to love them from square one. Love that crunch.
Millions of children, but one program in Colombia is giving kids a chance to hone their potential. On CNN World Report, 3 p.m. Eastern Sunday.
Here's the very latest. Approximately 3 hours ago, 2 planes collided on runway 24 left at Los Angeles International Airport. One was a U.S. Air Flight 1493. The other, a small commuter airline, SkyWest Flight 5569. This just in, the Federal Aviation Administration tells Reuters News Service that at least 4 people now are confirmed dead, at least 30 people are injured in this crash. The Federal Aviation Administration moments ago said that 29 people were unaccounted for, 72 people unaccounted for, without giving a definition of what unaccounted for and accounted for means. CNN's Dan Blackburn is standing by now at Los Angeles International Airport. Dan, what is the latest information that you're able to give us?
An official of U.S. Air has just spoken with us and tells us a number of things. At this point, there are 72 people who have been accounted for. Now, of those 72, 57 suffered either no injury or minor injuries. Repeating, 57 people suffered either no injuries or minor injuries. Of the 72 that have been accounted for thus far, 29 people remain missing. There's no indication as to how many were passengers, how many were crew, or anything like that. Now, what this tells us is that there were 12 people aboard the SkyWest commuter airplane with which the big U.S. Airjet collided. So you have 89 people on the U.S. airplane, and you have 12 people on the SkyWest commuter plane. The U.S. Air spokeswoman says that what happened was that the U.S. airplane was inbound, coming in for a landing, when it collided with the SkyWest plane, then sheared off and struck a building. That building was an old abandoned firehouse. There was no one in it. So there is no reason to believe at this point that there were any injuries on the ground unless there were some ground crew members nearby that no one at this point is aware of. They also tell us that when it comes to fatalities, they have as yet no firm figures, but the SkyWest commuter plane is crushed beneath the larger jet. So the prospects for the people on that plane clearly are not good. We do expect to have some additional information later. The NTSB investigators have arrived and are on the scene. They do not plan to talk with us tonight, but the word we get is that there will be a briefing by them tomorrow morning. The search is continuing for possible victims. They have given us a telephone number for families to call for U.S. Air information. And U.S. Air officials will take that information or give out that information to family members. They've asked us to pass that number along. It is area code 703-418-5100. That's area code 703-418-5100 for people who are concerned about family members, friends, or relatives who may have been on the U.S. Air flight. They are asked to call that number, and officials at U.S. Air will talk with them and provide them whatever information they have available at that time. Susan?
Dan, we should point out to our viewers that that we will get a graphic made up with that phone number. If you didn't get it, stand by. We will run the phone number again. Now, specifically, the FAA, Dan, is saying that runway 24 left was an active takeoff and landing runway. We had an earlier conversation with an Eastern Airlines pilot that called in and said that sometimes at LAX they will designate runways specifically just for landings or just for takeoffs. Do you have any information about that?
No, it is true that they do that at times at LAX, and what mode that runway was in at the time, I do not know. I suspect the tower does. Incidentally, one other thing that we don't have an answer to yet, but it's a question that several people have raised, is whether or not the pilot of the U.S. airplane said anything to the tower before the crash occurred. We are hoping that someone from the NTSB or the Department of Airports here will be able to answer that question before too much longer.
And of course, the NTSB GO team is reportedly on its way to Los Angeles. They will probably be there within several hours setting up the command post. Dan, we're going to let you go. We will come back to you later, of course. We will take a break. We will continue right after this.
Touchstone Pictures presents Green Card, the winner of 2 Golden Globe Awards for Best Picture and Best Actor. Bravo! And Joel Siegel raves, if you like Pretty Woman, give Green Card a try. Green Card, rated PG-13. And from Walt Disney Pictures comes a spectacular new outdoor adventure in the great Disney tradition, White Fang. Critics call it more gripping than Dances with Wolves. And Siskel and Ebert give 2 thumbs up for Jack London's White Fang, rated PG, and Green Card, both playing separately.
Here's an opportunity to receive a free copy of William F. Buckley's historic Agenda for the 90s.
Hi, I'm Bill Buckley. You may know me through my television show Firing Line, or my newspaper columns, or maybe one of my Blackfoot Oaks spy novels. But you ought to know about my magazine, National Review. A National Review gives you insights into current events and information about important issues from a decidedly different set of priorities. It gives you a point of view that may very well be like your own.
I like it because it cuts through the nonsense that normally surrounds most political issues with simple, common sense. And of course, I love the humor. It's a very funny magazine.
When you get National Review, you'll have news and opinion you can't find anywhere else. You can't find National Review on every newsstand, so this may be your only chance to get a copy.
Call this toll-free number now and we'll send you absolutely free Agenda for the 90s. For a trial subscription to National Review, call 1-800-257-1257. That's 1-800-257-1257.
Just over 3 hours ago, there was a crash at Los Angeles International Airport between a Boeing 737 and a small twin-engine turboprop Metro 3 commuter plane. Ellie Brecky is with the FAA. She is a spokeswoman with the FAA. Ellie, we talked about an hour and a half ago. What new information do you have now?
Well, we are still looking at about 101 people that were on both of those airplanes. We are still reporting that 29 are unaccounted for and 72 have been accounted for. We still do not know the status of those people as far as how many injuries or fatalities there were.
Ellie, give us a description, please, a definition of unaccounted for and accounted for. I think certain people can make certain assumptions about that, but I would like to hear your technical description, please.
As far as accounted for, those are actual people or perhaps bodies that we have located. 29 meaning that there are 29 missing at this point. Whether they have perhaps walked off or wandered off or been trapped in the wreckage, we do not yet know at this point. We have not been able to put that together from the manifest of both aircraft or the passenger list.
Can you give us a little bit of information about the runway? It is 24 left. I believe we have a graphic to help visually explain it as you talk us through it. Can we see the graphic? Great. Ellie, go ahead.
Okay. Runway 24 left, as you could see from your graphic, is a parallel runway to runway 24 right. That runway is used for both takeoffs and landings. Occasionally, we do designate one or the other for strictly takeoff or strictly landings, and that helps us expedite the traffic flow at Los Angeles Airport. However, it is open for both takeoffs and landings.
Was it open at the time of the crash for both takeoffs and landings?
Yes.
Okay.
This runway is used for both.
Okay. I'm sorry. I think I cut you off. Go ahead.
What I was going to say is that the collision on the ground occurred approximately about a third or one-fourth of the way down the runway near what we call taxiway 45, which is, like I said, about a third of the way down the runway on the eastern edge of that runway.
It looked on the graphic like it was closer to the end of the runway. Is that a correct characterization of this?
Yes, it's near the end of the runway, but somewhat down, not right at the very end, but down a little bit further.
Is this, the U.S. airplane was landing at that point. The commuter plane was taking off. At this particular, is this where the U.S. airplane would touch down if it were landing, or would the U.S. airplane have touched down considerably further up the runway and then taxied down with the brakes on?
It's hard to say exactly where it would have touched down. It certainly depends on the speed that the pilot's coming in at, the weight factor, the wind conditions, so it is difficult to say. It would not be unusual for the aircraft to touch down anywhere along that runway at the beginning. There is a marking on the runway, which is what we call a threshold, which is the first point at which an aircraft can land. And it can touch down at any point after that, as long as, of course, the pilot has enough room for braking. It really depends on the weight. But at the location where the accident occurred, it certainly would not be unusual for an aircraft to be either touching down or already taxiing from a touchdown. It's hard to say.
There are reports. Now, I understand that as we talk about this, until we get the final details, there is an awful lot of speculation. So I put that caveat on this at first. But there are reports that the landing gear on the U.S. Air Flight 1493 was up at the time. Have you been able to contact anyone in the control tower to see if the pilot of that flight called in any kind of problem, either landing gear or anything else?
The pilot did not report any type of emergency to the control tower when the pilot was landing. Normally, if gear was up, there would be an indication in the cockpit by a light, which would indicate to the pilot that he was having problems with the landing gear. The routine would be then, normally a pilot would declare an emergency and perhaps fly by the runway once or twice to allow the air traffic controllers to physically see if the landing gear was up or down. Now, that was not done in this case. So, but certainly that is something that will be looked at by the safety board.
Now, I missed the very beginning of your answer. Did you say that the pilot radioed no indication of problems prior to the crash? So, in other words, it was perceived to be, from everybody's standards, a routine landing?
That is the information that we have, that there was no emergency declared. There was no indication, as far as we know at this point, of a problem. However, just let me also add a caveat that we will be reviewing the air traffic control communications tapes. The National Transportation Safety Board will be talking to the air traffic controllers, and we will certainly verify. But at this point, we have no information that there was an emergency.
Ellie, it is one thing that I noticed covering the United Sioux City crash, that it was just amazing how few people died in that crash. Now, you do have 29 people unaccounted for, but so far you are only confirming 4 people dead. When you see something like this as a viewer, as a layman, as a civilian, you expect that number to be higher. Can you give us an indication technically why this number is so low?
I wish I could give you some more insight on that. I'm not an expert on accidents and air crashes per se. I'm sure that the National Transportation Safety Board will be looking at that very closely to see why this accident occurred and, of course, all the circumstances surrounding it.
Are you surprised that there are only 4 people confirmed dead now? Do you expect that number to go up as the 29 people who are now missing become accounted for in some sense?
I wish I knew, and I certainly hope that is not true. But at this point, I just don't know.
Okay, the NTSB crew is reportedly on its way to LAX. Their final investigation, I believe, can take 9 months to 12 months, a year to get anything. When will we be able to hear the air traffic controller tapes or the black box tapes? When could we expect to hear any words from this crash?
Well, as you mentioned, the National Transportation Safety Board will take custody of both those tapes. They will very closely review both of them, and when they're finished with their investigation and are certain that they have all the information they need, then they will be released to the public to hear. The National Transportation Safety Board will totally make that decision.
Ellie Brekke, FAA Regional Spokeswoman, thank you very much for your time. I know you're busy. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. We will take a break. Our coverage of the crash of U.S. Air Flight 1493 and SkyWest Flight 5569 will continue right after this.
Before they could walk.
So charades and Rocky 4x4s. It's not how many we make, it's how we make them.
As programming note, we need to tell you that currently we are feeding in the tape from the question and answer session from the U.S. Air press conference. As soon as we get that tape in-house, we will, of course, turn it around and play it for you, so you will get the very latest on the crash at LAX.
Also, we will have the very latest developments for you on the war in the Persian Gulf. We'll be back in a moment.
In session, Moose. Oh.
This is CNN.
Just a little under 3.5 hours ago, two planes collided on runway 24 left at Los Angeles International Airport. One plane was a Boeing 737-300 series, that belonging to U.S. Air. The second plane was a commuter aircraft, SkyWest Flight 5569. The commuter aircraft was en route from Los Angeles to Palmdale. The U.S. Air flight was from Columbus, Ohio, and was landing at Los Angeles. CNN's Robert Vito has further details.
A U.S. Air 737 inbound to Los Angeles broke into pieces after colliding on the runway with a smaller commuter plane and burst into flames.
I saw the back of the plane on fire, and then I saw the whole body of the plane ignite in flames, and it came down the runway, leaving a trail of flames on the runway.
With the small plane trapped beneath its belly, the jetliner crashed into a vacant building near the runway. Eyewitnesses described the scene at the airport as chaos. The plane was at the center of an army of emergency workers, and there was a parade of ambulances to nearby hospitals. Varying reports said the airliner carried about 90 passengers and a crew of 6 or 7. This smaller plane, a twin-engine SkyWest commuter, can carry 19 passengers and a crew of 2. The U.S. Air flight originated in Syracuse, New York, and made connections in Washington, D.C. and Columbus, Ohio, before flying on to Los Angeles. Ultimately, the 737 was destined for San Francisco. The commuter aircraft was scheduled to make a short flight to Palmdale, California. One man watched the scene through his telescope.
Passengers trying to get out of the rear entrance they already had the landing out, and they were sliding down that. The front door was locked, or it looked like it was shut, but there were flames in the cockpit.
The injured were taken to a half-dozen hospitals in the area near the airport. The National Transportation Safety Board dispatched a team to investigate the accident. Robert Vito, CNN, Los Angeles.
At a press conference at Los Angeles International Airport, a spokesman for U.S. Air said 57 people escaped serious injuries. They either had minor or no injuries in the crash. Let's get further details from that press conference.
Yes, it was a flight. To my understanding, I don't know who owns or operates the commuter aircraft.
There were reports that there was landing gear trouble, perhaps.
Not to my knowledge.
My numbers don't add up here. You said 72 accounted for, 29 not accounted for.
Right, that is the numbers that I got from the fire department. Well, that's 80, I know, but it was 83 passengers and 6 crew on the U.S. Air aircraft. So there must have been other, yes, there was other people apparently on the commuter aircraft.
Did the pilot survive and any of the crew?
I don't know. We don't have confirmation on the crew or...
Some passengers reported hearing some kind of explosion. Do you have any reports on that?
No, I don't.
Do you have any reports of people on the ground being hurt, or was there nobody in the building and if not?
There was nobody in the building. The building is an unoccupied fire station.
Did anybody walk away from this?
Yes, they did. There were a number of survivors.
Where are they now?
They are in a staging area. They're being made comfortable, and they're being referred to hospitals and taken care of.
Are they together with their relatives?
I don't know. That is our corporate headquarters, and we will make sure that as soon as the passenger list and the next of kin are notified that
plane hit the other plane first and then the building, or the building and then the other plane?
I have no knowledge of what happened as the sequence of events. All I saw was what is there now.
Describe in some detail just what you're doing for the families and the passengers, the process that you go through, the specific steps, generally the type of area they're in, who visits them.
Basically, we have a lot of our employees who have come in from off the job. They are taking care of these passengers. They're making sure that they are comfortable, that they have adequate medical care. that we do everything that we can to make them feel as best as we can.
How many people do you have together?
Pardon me?
Are there any ground crew that are missing?
I don't know because I don't know the ground crew or the flight crew.
Out of the numbers that are accounted for, how many of those are flight crew members?
That I don't know. I know that there were 57 minor or non-injuries at all, and the other injuries vary from severe to moderate.
What type, do you know?
No, they didn't say what types of injuries were
burn,
incurred.
you know, burn victims?
There was a fire,
And where
but
are
I
these
don't
people
know.
being taken?
That I don't know. I asked them where they're being taken.
Your operations, are you back to normal now? I noticed a number of delayed and canceled flights.
No, U.S. Air was landing
Where did the
inbound
fire
from. As far as I know, I can't really confirm where the impact occurred.
You know, the smaller plane, was that taking off? That's still...
I don't know.
Do you have any idea how many people were on that other plane?
No, but if we add these numbers together,
Were both planes taxiing, or was one landing and the other
the
taxiing?
U.S. Air was landing. It was due in at 6:11 p.m., so it was on its landing roll. I have no idea. No.
Did the pilot give any kind of indication or something about that happening? Did he get a radio instance?
I have not talked to anyone else. I have no details. I think the NTSB will be more helpful tomorrow with what they find.
What about the other plane was doing?
No confirmation on that at all. I can't really tell you what the condition of the airplane is. It looks like an airplane that has crashed and
Can you
burned.
describe any more of what the airplane looked like?
No, I really can't.
Is it burned?
taxiing on the runway?
That I don't know. All I know is that there was a collision between the two aircraft.
Can you tell us about the plane, what type of plane, whether it was
Yes.
a fairly new plane with some of the safety procedures?
It's a 737-300 aircraft. It seats 128 passengers. This is the U.S. Air airplane that I'm talking about.
Does it have
What
some
about the
modern, I know that
emergency
there's some
exits? What do they
fire-resistant materials in some of the newer planes. Is there any of that?
I don't know. I don't know at the present. All I know it is a new airplane. Our entire fleet with U.S. Air is less than 8.5 years old, so it's a very modern airplane.
Again, how many passengers does it hold and who made it?
128 passengers, and it is a Boeing 737-300 aircraft.
That's not how many passengers you had on board tonight.
No, we didn't have that many passengers. We had 89 passengers and crew total.
Do you know if the passengers had to be pulled, if any of the survivors would be pulled from the level, or did they all make it down the emergency chutes, or, you know?
I don't know.
Tell us how many
I don't know.
emergency exits there are. Some passengers describe chutes in the back of the plane. How is it configured?
There are, I don't know. I don't have any information on what the tower.
Again, you have been listening to the first press conference given by U.S. Air. Spokeswoman Agnes Huff has been answering reporters' questions about the crash tonight, a little over 3.5 hours ago at Los Angeles International Airport. To recap briefly, 89 people reportedly were on the U.S. airplane. It collided with a small commuter plane, SkyWest Flight 5569. There were reportedly 12 people on the SkyWest plane. Total 57 people are reported to have survived serious injuries. Those people are reported to have either minor or no injuries. 29 people are reported missing. 15 people are reported injured. No word yet to the extent on their injuries. The FAA is saying that 29 people are missing. They are accounted for. The FAA says 72 people are accounted for without giving a definition of accounted and unaccounted. We will take a break. Our coverage will continue right after this.